Randi, Weingarten, you are really leading education in the country. You've got union leaders in different cities around the country who are in your umbrella, including here in New Haven. You've had somebody who has been one of the groundbreaking leaders in the country working with Dr. Mayo. You've also seen a variety of efforts that look very different around the country. Kind of the benefit of kind of the laboratories of democracy approach right into your watch in many ways. And I'm curious, what would you describe are the key components of a teacher evaluation system, design and implementation, that actually can drive improvement of teaching and student achievement? What for you are the big lessons learned from what's happened so far?
And I have 45 minutes, right?
Well, 8 in front of this group.
I'm teasing.
8 in front of this group, but 35 more with me in the room next door.
So let me say a couple of things. First off, we have, and this is great that there's a superintendent and a union head right next to each other. We actually gave out this document because the Superintendents Association of the United States and our union, and Sharon Palmer, the head of our Connecticut affiliate, is here. Thank you, Sharon, for being here. You can all clap for Sharon. Dave. Thank you. Sorry to be so directive. But you can read a lot about where we're going in this document, so I don't have to do the kind of education syndicates is smiling. I don't have to do the education words here. I can just kind of do my words. So, but what's important about this document is that it starts with what the AFT framework was on teacher development and on evaluation and on tenure. And then we had this amazing process between the administrators of the United States and us in terms of thinking, could we get together in one room and come up with one framework? And we did. And in some ways, what Reggie just said, I would have said it differently, but what he just said by saying you can get rid of a tenured teacher is essentially saying if you have a meaningful framework and you have support, then you can have a process that's very efficient and very effective, and no longer is the issue of tenure going to be an issue that is an excuse for managers not to manage or for incompetence to be cloaked. And that's what I think you're seeing in terms of New Haven and in other places. And I give them, and then I'll go to the general, I give Dave and Reggie and Garth and others tremendous amount of credit because there were huge trust issues initially about this process. Would there be a really meaningful evaluation process that was both about continuous improvement as well as assessment? Or would it be something that was simply a political firing line? And it became a process, and Reggie talked about it in terms of the learning assessment, the learning objectives. It's becoming, because it's still a work in process and a work in progress, it became a process of continual learning and continual engagement. Teachers and administrators, teachers and kids, over those learning objectives, and a feedback loop around that. So it became fair and meaningful as opposed to gotcha. And that's really what's important about New Haven and the continuous work that all are doing to try to get to those learning objectives, to make sure that they are meaningful for kids, to make sure that there are feedback loops for teachers and support for teachers, and to make sure all of that is aligned. Now, my words. Evaluation is not the be-all and the end-all in education. There's a whole bunch of things that you have to do. You have to have collaboration. You have to have the building of capacity. You have to have, both in terms of instruction, thinking about teachers and administrators and thinking about curriculum. I'm using a lot of C's today. So collaborative reform, capacity building, curriculum. They're not wraparound services, but let me call them community services then. Community engagement. I saw Gwen here, I saw others here. This is a shared responsibility, not a top-down accountability process. And commitment. You have to have all of that. It doesn't work if you only have a focus and a fixation on, I'm going to make sure those individual teachers are the best they can be. Because even when they're the best they can be, it doesn't mean we're going to help all kids all the time. And in some ways, what Reggie did in the first 4 minutes said that. But when we get to the issue of evaluation, why does the AFT look at that issue as a lever? Because everywhere in the United States of America, in some ways everywhere in the world, there is a role for evaluation of teachers. And so if you think about that as a lever for continuous improvement, you can use that in an incredibly productive way. If you think about it simply as a snapshot, it's not going to be productive. It's going to be an assessment. It might be a firing line, it might be a gotcha. But if you think about evaluation, because we have to all do it, as a way of bootstrapping development and improvement, it can be a very powerful lever in education. And so if you remember anything that I say today, it's that evaluation has to be about continuous improvement. This document has all the 5 different components of it. Let me do it in English. I do it 2 ways. I think about it this way. Have I taught what needs to be taught? In a period of time when kids need to know and do very different things than they did even when I went to high school. And secondly, have kids learned? So what do I need them to learn? How do I know if they have learned it? And what supports are available if they haven't? And in terms of the practice, because I'm trying to show how complicated this is, in terms of the practice of how have I taught it, I need to know my content. But I also need to be able to execute my content. I need to be able to differentiate instruction to the needs of my kids. And if I'm a high school teacher in New York City, as I was, that means 170 to 200 kids, if I didn't grieve class size. I need to look at this data as my friend, not my enemy, to see if it's to see where our kids are. And this argument about testing has become incredibly ridiculous. Every teacher I know creates tests to figure out where their kids are. But this was about student improvement. Most tests were never created as a teacher evaluation document, which is part of the reason why, if they're used that way, it has to be part of multiple measures. Now, everybody would agree about content, differentiated instruction, and using data to guide. This is where the good systems and the bad systems diverge. What are the tools and conditions that are available and that are used to help teachers hone their craft? And that doesn't just mean a one-on-one supervisor to teacher. That means things like professional learning communities. Because if you have a situation, and I'll use me, I remember I was a social studies teacher, trying to teach executive privilege. Anybody in this room ever try to teach executive privilege to 11th graders? And I thought, okay, this is great, the Vietnam War, the War Powers Act, this is going to be great. And my kids in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, looked at me like I had 27 horns. What the heck are you talking about? I didn't curse. And I remember that lesson and coming back and saying, well, that didn't really work. And thinking and talking to my colleagues, okay, how do you do this? What do you do? And the best ways I did it, the second and third and the fourth time I taught that issue, was thinking about Truman and dropping the bomb and those decisions and whether those decisions were made by an executive or by Congress. But engaging kids, my kids loved the debate about dropping the bomb. And that was the engagement vehicle to get them into thinking about a more complicated concept. Now, why do I go through that? That's a lot of feedback I got over a 3-year period of time to hone that lesson right. That is what evaluation should be in the best ways. Making you think about this stuff, thinking about it in a community, thinking about it with your administrators, having the tools and conditions to do that and the support to do that.
Randi, I hate to have you in there for now, but I'd say wrap up and then we'll do follow-up questions at the end of the session.
So what New Haven has done in their learning objectives is they're taking the notion of continuous improvement and they're deconstructing it to this idea of what have I taught and what have students learned, and having constant support and feedback. And when you do a system like that, it becomes pretty easy to figure out who can do it and who can't, and who has the potential and who doesn't. And then you create support, and if somebody still can't, then you know that that person ought not be in our profession. It's tough and it's hard, but if we really want to get this right, that's the way we have to do it, and that's what the AFT has been trying to do with districts and with states all across the country. Last point. It's much easier to fight, particularly in a period of time of having no resources. And the fight is good for only one person, and that person is the person with the money, because they don't have to spend it on kids. The fight is not good for children. And it's much harder to do a collaborative and teamwork approach, but the only way we will actually help all kids, not some kids, dream their dreams and achieve them, the only way we get back to the American dream is if we, in the education space, figure out how to work collaboratively. Thank you very much.